Hi, I'm Teri Hart, and this is The Hart of It All, a podcast about navigating the realities of caregiving. Today's episode is talking about nutrition for not just the seniors in our life, but also for caregivers, because in that role, we often forget about our own basic needs. Not only do our nutritional needs change as we age, but our appetites and taste buds change too. So settle in, maybe with a snack, as we take care of our nutritional needs. Full disclosure, today's episode of The Heart of It All is for my mom. When I was thinking about what to talk about on this podcast, this was a potential topic. And I was running the ideas by my mom, and I said, I don't know about this one. And she said, ooh, I'm really interested in that, especially since dad died. And that's a big change for me. So here you go, Mom. Today, we are going to talk about nutrition. A recent study from the Canadian Longitudinal Study on Aging and assessed by University of Waterloo researchers found that 1/3 of older Canadians are at nutritional risk, and that those that scored higher on the Screen 8 test, meaning better nutrition, had significantly lower odds of reporting an overnight hospital stay, visiting a hospital emergency room, or seeing a doctor for an infection when followed up 3 years later. The fact is that how well you eat affects your overall health in the most significant way. So, how should seniors be eating? If we're cooking for them or buying food for them, what should we keep in mind? Do our nutritional needs change as we age? And when we are in a caregiving role, how are we also taking care of our own nutritional needs? Once I started digging into this topic, I realized there is a lot to cover. And I reached out to a person who I had heard on my friend Melissa Grello's podcast, Aging Powerfully. I knew that she had just the right information for us here on The Heart of It All. Devon Peart is a registered dietitian with a master's in nutrition from the University of Toronto. She works in women's health and executive health programs at Cleveland Clinic in Toronto, as well as private nutrition counseling. Devon specializes in healthy aging, menopause, and brain health. Devon has written for a variety of outlets, including Huffington Post Canada. She is frequently interviewed for print and web platforms, including Costco, Narcity Toronto, Yahoo Canada, Cleveland Health Clinic Essentials, and has shared her nutrition expertise on CHCH TV. Devon has worked in both private and public sectors, including Mount Sinai Hospital and Heart and Stroke Foundation of Canada, and as an instructor in the fitness and health promotion program at Humber College. When she's not working, Devon enjoys yoga, strength training, and knitting. Devon, thank you so much for being here on The Heart of It All. We have so much to cover.
My pleasure.
Well, I listened to you on Melissa's podcast, and I just thought the way you speak about this is so clear. And that's what we want on The Heart of It All. We want this to be a resource to people. And when I was doing the research, the first thing I thought of was, that pyramid that we thought we all kind of grew up with an idea of that's how we're supposed to eat. What has changed from that pyramid idea of eating to what is now used, which is a food guide plate?
Yeah. So it's funny. The pyramid is actually American, but a lot of us thought of that as almost like our guide. But also our guide was just, I think, maybe a little bit more behind the scenes for years. It started in the 40s as kind of a wartime measure. And it was called Canada's Food Rules. And it was really to address like sort of food scarcity and what are the things that you need to have. And then it kind of evolved over the years. There's been a few different iterations. It became, you might remember, that looked sort of like a sundial. And it had the groups around it, right? And then it was the rainbow. That's the one I kind of remember from school, was the rainbow. And now it's the plate. So we still have the idea of food groups, but the newest iteration really takes into account broader array of things. So what's your food environment like? Is eating a social time for you? Like the importance of that aspect. It's more about proportions. That's where you get kind of half your plate vegetables quarter of your plate for starch, quarter of your plate for protein. So they got away from so much math, I think, and made it a kind of, I think, more practical, usable guide. It also, there's more emphasis on plant foods because that's really a direction that a lot of people want to go, is including more plant foods in their diet. And then also an appreciation of a broad array of foods that are kind of important for different cultures. Also mindful eating, right? So eating without distractions, eating without screens, the social sort of nature, enjoyment of food, rather than making it so prescriptive, you need this many servings.
So, my understanding from you that really the government is looking at eating and nutrition through more of a holistic lens.
I think it's so important. I say to patients all the time that oftentimes when people are trying to improve their eating, the part that they leave out is enjoyment, right? They say, well, okay, I need this and I need this and I need this and I have to have this. And they forget about, do I like it? And I just feel that's such a shame. And, people should enjoy their food. It's one of the great pleasures of life. So I think that is something that's really kind of been missing from the idea of healthy eating.
I love the idea of enjoyment because really what the heart of it all is about is making sure that the seniors in our life are enjoying their life. So let's shift to the idea of seniors. What do you see with seniors and the challenges that they have specifically with their diets?
So there's a lot. There's a lot. So I'll kind of list off some things and then we can go into more detail wherever you like. So loneliness is one thing, right? Oftentimes seniors may be widowed, right? Or even if it's a couple, maybe their children are grown and they don't visit enough, right? Sometimes the older people are. I remember my mom saying this to me, like, you start to lose people, right? More people in your circle pass away or get sick or, and so your world gets smaller. Your social world gets smaller. So there's a lot of loneliness. So that's a really big thing and it affects appetite.
And would you classify depression in there with loneliness?
Yeah, it could be on that spectrum, sure. Yeah, it can lead to clinical depression, absolutely. Loneliness, lack of food skills, and this happens, I would say, more often in the way the past generations have been, this happens more often for men, right? So we see this so often and it breaks my heart. A man who's maybe in his late 70s, his wife has passed, he's never cooked. He doesn't know how. So people just don't necessarily know how to cook because they weren't the primary food preparer. Sometimes seniors are on a fixed income, so that's another issue. Cooking for one is tricky, right? There's challenges there. And then there's appetite changes, taste bud changes.
Do our nutritional needs change as we age? Or when you talk about that half plate for fruit and vegetables, quarter plate for protein, quarter plate for starch, does that remain true for our entire lives?
I mean, I think proportionately, yes. It doesn't have to be the entire half of your plate, right? But proportionately, the idea is that you want mostly vegetables and fruit, and then some protein and some starch. And that doesn't really change. Specifically, we do need a little more protein as we get older. And that's because we naturally, as part of the aging process, we lose lean tissue. We lose muscle. It's just a normal part of aging, right? And so this is why, and especially amidst kind of the aging population, we're hearing so much, protein, 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 right? But I think in this particular population, it is extremely important because as we get older, we lose lean tissue. And so we need more protein. Oftentimes at the same time, there's this kind of a dichotomy because at the same time, we don't really want to eat as much protein.
My mom, she's going to be so mad at me anyway. She can sometimes, since my dad died, resort to having a veggies and dip plate for dinner. What could she do? What's a really practical thing that she could add to that veggie plate that is low effort and that will get some protein into her diet?
It's very easy, especially as we get older, especially as our taste buds change. It's very easy to sort of ruin our appetite. The problem with having a plate full of vegetables is once you start eating those, there's a lot of water and fiber there, and that fills up your tummy and you're just not hungry anymore. And I find that myself. If I have a plate, sort of the classic plate of like rice and chicken and vegetables, I don't have a very big appetite. I eat often. Right? And so if I start with the vegetables and the rice, say, I'll kind of look at the chicken. I don't really necessarily want it. And so that's what I mean by prioritize. So try to get some bites of the protein in before you ruin your appetite. That's the issue, is that you don't want to displace, right? So on that plate, I would say a dip maybe that has some protein in it. So maybe hummus, maybe guacamole that's made with avocado and Greek yogurt instead of sour cream. Then you're getting some good protein there, right? Maybe you make a yogurt dip, put some flavored like herbs in there that you like and dip the veggies in there. Or let's see, some boiled eggs and slice them up, right? Like, and the reason I say slice them up is there's something sort of interesting with the human brain that like the appearance of food really makes a difference to whether we want to be bothered with it or not, right? And so I say to people when it comes to healthy food, like make it nice, because oftentimes we put the effort into the pie or the chocolate cake, we make it gorgeous, but we don't put as much effort into the healthier stuff. So make it nice.
So grocery stores often have some pre-made things like, some cut up pre-made chicken breast or turkey breast or whatever it is. What is your opinion on buying some of those pre-made things?
Some of them I think are fantastic. I often recommend the cooked, grilled, sliced chicken or turkey rather than like the deli style meat that has more processing, but like the cooked grilled chicken.
I'm going to do a list here. So pre-made cooked chicken and turkey breast gets a check mark from Devon.
Yeah. You can get a bagged mixed salad. You can get a bag of cooked grilled chicken and literally just throw them together and, call it a day, right? Or an air fryer. Do you have?
I do. Changed my life. Again, using my mom as a reference for this episode and a lot of things. She uses her air fryer, and it really does mean she's not worried about, oh, when am I going to get to cleaning my oven? She's not worried about more dishes. Like, it just seems like it is a pathway to convenience for healthy eating.
You can, boneless, skinless chicken breast, olive oil, some black pepper, maybe some paprika or whatever you like. That's what I like. And you can put it in for 10 minutes, then flip it over and then throw in some Brussels sprouts with olive oil on them for the last 10 minutes and you're good. The other thing with the salad and chicken, you can also, at the beginning of the week, cook up some brown rice or some quinoa or something and then toss that in with the salad and chicken. So you're getting a really balanced meal that's got protein and fiber in it. The other thing you can do in the air fryer that I think people don't always do enough of is like salmon cooks beautifully. Olive oil, black pepper, whatever other spice you like, throw it in, usually like 15 minutes. And I sometimes will just have that on a salad.
I like a
Done.
little Dijon mustard on my salmon.
Yes, absolutely.
We're turning into a cooking podcast, you and I. Who knew? For those days that we don't feel like, or we can't get around to, or we haven't done the shopping or whatever it is. And this is a situation again that my mom was kind of asking me about. She said, since she's been on her own, she finds herself buying more frozen meals and prepared foods. What should we be looking for in those? What gets a Devon checkmark and what gets a Devon yellow light moderation?
So the main things I would look, there's a few. Sodium, because the thing with packaged foods, they tend to have a lot of salt for flavor and for preservation. So you really want to watch. A lot of times with people as we get older, blood pressure, even after menopause, blood pressure often goes up. So as a general rule, if you look at the percent daily value or percent DV on the nutrition facts panel, if something has more than 15%, it's generally considered a lot. If it has 5% or less, it's considered a little. That being said, it's hard to find actually a prepared meal that has that little sodium. So as a general rule, unless you have a problem with blood pressure, like for a whole meal, like an entree, try to find, if you're wanting to watch the sodium, 400 milligrams or less for that meal, that entree.
Okay, that's a great tangible tip.
And then a couple other things, and this is one that really kind of bugs me because so often food that's in restaurants or packaged food, it looks like it has more protein than it has, and it drives me crazy. Minimum 20 grams of protein in a meal. So like if you had a bowl of Greek yogurt at breakfast, say, there's nearly 20 grams of protein there. If you have a 6-ounce piece of fish that you make, or chicken or beef, there's probably 45 grams of protein for reference, right? Minimum 20.
What's an egg? I think that we're misled on eggs. I think we think eggs have more protein than they do. I think it's like 10 grams?
6.
Devon, you're breaking my egg loving heart.
So what you can do is you can do 2 eggs, say, and then dump in some egg white and scramble it up, because that's adding just more protein without the fat and cholesterol. The other thing to look at, some of the quote unquote healthy frozen entrees, just double check the calories, because sometimes there's just not enough sustenance there. So I've seen some that are marketed as like a healthy meal and they'll have like 260 calories. It's like a snack. So for a meal for women, sort of 400 to 600 calories. For men, maybe 600 to 800 calories. So keep that in mind. And if a person's eating often through the day, that may be fine, but keep that in mind.
So we've got the tips on the frozen prepared foods. What about when I am visiting and I want to cook some things up for my mom and have them put in the freezer?
So start always with what the person likes, right? Because there's oftentimes well-intentioned people will make things that they think their parents should have, and then they go back and, oh, here it is. It's still in the freezer, right? So start with what they like and what they want to have. And then if they love lasagna, maybe you make lasagna and maybe you throw some broccoli in that lasagna, right? Like maybe you throw in some things, or maybe you throw in some beans into the meat lasagna to bump up the fiber and the healthy fat and the plant protein, right? So think about kind of adding some things in that you think are important, but it's still something that's palatable. It can be, soups, stews. You had mentioned before to me one time that you love making soups. Soups are a great thing to freeze, right? Soups, stews, curries, casseroles, things like that. The other tip that I would give is what can be helpful is dividing them into individual portions and freezing them that way. The other thing is you can make something like, say, macaroni and cheese, if your mom loves that, and then suggest to her that when she has it, what I'll often do with mac and cheese is dump in like a can of tuna when I'm going to eat it. You can always add to things when you go to eat them.
Okay, so we've covered frozen prepared foods. We've covered how we're going to cook for the seniors in our life. Now I'm going to ask a question that is really highlighting a situation that many people find themselves in that's really, really difficult. When seniors find themselves in treatment for cancer, other medications that have changed their taste buds, and they're having to resort to meal supplements, so meal replacement drinks. What are those options out there, and how can families support somebody with that decision and help them to make that decision so they're still being nourished?
Yeah, I mean, it always depends on the situation. If it's an acute situation where they're currently undergoing chemo, say, and it's a temporary situation and then they're going to have a break from the chemo, then you do whatever you need to do, right? If they have to sort of nearly rely on those shakes at that time, fine. But over the longer term, we certainly want to prioritize whole foods as the mainstay of the diet and then use those supplements as supplements. So, maybe a person has, or like it could be an Ensure, it could be a Boost, it could be a Fairlife protein shake. There's a new product that I really like, and it's called Oikos Pro, and it has 24 grams of protein and no added sugar. So kind of experimenting with one that they like, but trying not to have it become a total crutch where they don't really want to bother with food. So if they're not wanting to bother with food, that's worth exploring. Are they sad? Are they lonely? Do they just not want to eat alone? Trying to find out what's the issue. A lot of the cancer meds, as well as other medications, affect the taste of foods. The classic thing, my mom used to say this when she had Parkinson's, metallic tasting. Or if there's nausea, which happens with cancer treatment sometimes. Sometimes having food that's more bland, that you can't smell it as much, is less nauseating.
What about making one's own smoothie with protein powder in it?
100%. Yeah. And you don't even have to make a smoothie. You certainly can. You can put a scoop of protein powder. You can put Greek yogurt. You can put fruit. You can put frozen veggies. If I'm making a fruit smoothie, I always throw in half a cup of frozen kale or spinach because you don't even taste it. Like, why not? Right? You can add in some ground flax or some chia, like something that will help with bowel function, which can be helpful for people. It doesn't have to be an ordeal. If you don't want to do that, you can do a scoop of protein powder mixed with milk or water. Milk, I find, tastes better. Plus, you're getting a little more protein and you're getting calcium and lots of other nutrients. So it can be as simple as getting a shaker cup, which is a cup that has the little whisk in it, which just blends up the protein better, and just scoop of powder with milk or water, shake it up, pick a flavor you like.
I love that.
The other thing you can do around if somebody's having medical procedures, if food isn't tasting right, rinsing your mouth out before a meal can be helpful to kind of get rid of that metallic aftertaste of meds.
What a great tip, Devon. Rinse out with just water, with mouthwash, with
Having a bit of mint or like a mint tea before a meal or ginger, something like that to kind of offset that aftertaste from meds. If there's nausea, having your medication with your evening meal so that if your stomach's kind of yucky, you're sleeping anyway. The other thing is what time of day are they most hungry and planning a balanced meal for that time of day when they're most likely to have it.
you bring up a very good point. What does their day look like?
People always ask me, like, can I eat late? Do I have to have breakfast? There's no have tos, right? You find out what works well for you. Your body doesn't care when you eat. If you eat a big meal too close to bedtime and blood flow is diverted to digestion, it can interfere with sleep quality. But some people sleep like a baby. If you're inclined towards reflux or what we used to call heartburn, where stomach acid makes its way back up the esophagus, if you are horizontal too soon after a meal, whether it's on the couch watching Netflix or whether it's bed, that can exacerbate reflux or heartburn in people that are inclined. So those kind of things, but strictly speaking, your body doesn't care when you get the calories.
So one of the things I promised our listeners today is we weren't just going to talk about seniors and their nutritional needs, but we're going to talk also about caregivers and what happens when you're in that caregiving role. And sometimes we forget about ourselves. What are some of the danger zones for people who are caregiving in terms of their own food choices?
Such a huge issue, Teri. I hear from so many patients at Cleveland Clinic where I work, where people are helping aging parents. And so patients all the time will say to me, this whole last year has been a write-off because my parent had knee surgery. They're driving to their parents' place. They're coming back home. They're eating at drive-thrus. They're grabbing a quick, muffin or donut and a coffee while still working, while still maybe even still parenting. The biggest danger zone, I would say, in that situation, two things are heavy reliance on processed, packaged, purchased foods and erratic meal timing. When you're working, you're busy all day, say, then we overeat, we eat the wrong things. We're just kind of grabbing whatever's going to get us satisfied the quickest.
So, Devon, you actually have your own personal experience with this from when your dad died and then when your mom lived with you for a period of time. What did you notice about your own health and food choices around that time?
So one thing that I noticed, I'm a real tea drinker. I get steep tea oftentimes from Tim Hortons or I make it at home. So I would go through the drive-through and I realized that I was getting a donut. And I don't even really like donuts. And for that first week after my dad passed, because he passed very suddenly, he had an aneurysm and collapsed and it was very sudden. And so it's a fog. And I remember saying to my husband, I keep getting a donut. It's weird. It only was for about a week. And then I kind of became aware of it. And then I guess being a dietitian. So okay, can't keep doing that. Right. And so it shows how grief, right, can manifest in such interesting ways because we're just trying to soothe and humans soothe with food. And that's absolutely rational. And if it's becoming a crutch, then you need to sort of, okay, let me find something else, soothe with something else that's not nutrient poor food. What I did when my mom moved in with us, and it was a wild time. I had a toddler and a 14-year-old and a 9-year-old, and I was working. So it was a wild, wild time.
I think that is the definition of sandwich generation.
Yes. Yeah, it was. I had flexibility in my schedule, but it was a lot. And I suddenly decided to join the gym. It was like a light bulb one day. And it was a good decision because A, it was a healthy decision. And B, it got me out of the house and it got me my own time. Right. And so I think when you're stretched a bunch of different ways with caregiving and with work and everything else, being able to carve out some time that are for healthy things, right? Whether it's going for a walk, good for mental health, good for heart health, good for literally everything, right? Going to a gym. After my mom passed, it was a pandemic. It was 2020. I sent to chapters online because nothing was open and got a learn to knit a scarf kit. And I started knitting and it's the most zen, I was doing a lot of yoga. Try to find some things that give you some me time because I remember when my mom moved in with us and she ended up being with us for a year, one of my neighbors sort of saw my face, right? I drove past her one day and she said, "Ooh, intervention time." She had me go see her sister, who's a social worker in a nursing home. And her sister said to me, the social worker said to me, "You cannot do what it is you're trying to do. There's too much. You're going to get sick." and then you're not going to be there for anybody. And what she said, and I thought this was so interesting, she said, we have people that work here that do what you're doing. They're trained to do it, and they do it for 8 hours a day. And then they go home. You're not getting away. There's no break. And she said, it's just too much. And so what we did eventually was found a retirement home that had an assisted living floor. And my mom ended up being there for 4 years. It was amazing. But my point is so much stress, sleep deprivation, sleep quality issues. You're just so close to the situation. This is someone that you absolutely love.
I'm so sorry for that difficult time. I mean, the process that you would have had to go through to make those really correct decisions for your mom, but finding the right time to make them as well, I think is the secret sauce to those very difficult times for people. So for caregivers, how can we have an idea of the quality of food that our loved ones are eating when we aren't with them day to day? What are some of the questions we can ask? And what can we look for when we are with them that might be giving us clues?
Questions is a trickier one because people are pretty good at giving the correct answer. What you can say, though, is if they describe like what a normal day is like, you can say, that sounds like an ideal day. What about a not ideal day? And then you might hear a different story, right? But also when you're there, look for things like check expiry dates. Our parents' generation are famous for holding on to stuff. So check expiry dates and get rid of stuff. But also take note of heavy reliance on snack foods, on treat foods. The problem with that is it's likely displacing foods that they need. Having a chocolate bar or a bag of chips is not the end of the world. If we're having too many of those foods, it's displacing healthy foods that we need, and it's taking away the desire to eat those other foods. And that's, I think, the biggest risk with a senior population because they already have more of a taste oftentimes for sweet foods or salty foods because taste buds shrink. We have less taste buds as we age. So our appetite changes, our appetite gets less, and our taste buds get less. We need more sweetness to notice it. We need more saltiness to notice it.
Devon, I'm telling you, the last year of my dad's life, it was like eating with Buddy the Elf. He could not put enough syrup on a pancake. So when we notice that, what are those taste buds telling us about the changes in somebody's health?
I mean, it's a loaded question because it can be so many things. It can be depression that a person is just trying to feel better with sweets. It can be the taste that's being affected by medications. It can be blood sugars thrown off. If people are eating in a really erratic pattern, if they're skipping meals, if they're forgetting to eat, especially if there's some level of dementia. Sometimes people just forget, or they just forget because they're out of a routine and they don't have their partner saying they're hungry. So for many, many reasons, they just are maybe missing meals. When we get into kind of an undernourished state, the body's sort of mechanism for that, kind of bring back homeostasis, is to crave sweet foods because they're high calorie.
Really?
Yeah.
So if we notice somebody is eating a ton of sweet foods, it could possibly be that they are undernourished.
Absolutely. It's a cyclical thing. They can be undernourished because they're eating a lot of sweets. I see this all the time where they're picking away through the day and never sitting down to like a balanced meal. So again, it's not that those foods are, terrible, but if you are an older person, you already have less appetite. That's where you need to prioritize those foods that we really need, the protein foods, the complex carbs, things like that. And then have the sweet if you still want it. Prioritize those other foods.
Meal delivery services. We hear about them. They're advertised. Good, bad. Where are we at with meal delivery services? Could they be the answer for people?
Yeah, absolutely. Many of them are fantastic. I want people to be aware there are two different sort of levels of meal delivery services. There's the meal kits, HelloFresh, Good Food, there's many of them, where they give you essentially a recipe, they give you the ingredients. Oftentimes they'll be a little bit prepped, the veggies may be cut up, and it's sort of like a 10, maybe 15, 20-minute assembly. That can be good for people who don't want to have to think of what to have, who maybe don't want to go do the shopping, right? Or can't. The other level is fully prepared meals. And it depends where you are. You have to sort of check what's in your area. But oftentimes they're fresh and they'll deliver them during the night while you're asleep, maybe between like noon and 5. If you're in a condo, they'll deliver them to the concierge. And then you put it in the fridge and then heat it up when you're ready to have it. There are some that do fully prepared frozen as well. They're as close to home prepared as you're going to get without home preparing. You can maybe do your thing part of the time, or maybe you have something in the freezer that Teri made that you can have part of the time, and then you can have those for when you're in a pinch. So that I think is a great idea. The other thing, though, that I wanted to talk about is the social, and this is on the food guide, right? Like we talked about it at the beginning, the social aspect of eating. So, so important. And that's what's often missing for seniors. And so even if you have a healthy, balanced meal there, you may not want to eat it.
Because they're alone, just so I'm understanding. So loneliness in seniors is tied directly to their want to eat and therefore their appetite.
Yeah, it can be loneliness, yes. But even if they're not particularly lonely, they just may not want to eat by themselves because it's just not fun for a lot of people. Like meals tend to be a communal thing, whether it's you and your partner, whether it's you and your sister, whether it's you and your mom. And so what they noticed with the Meals on Wheels program decades ago is they would deliver the meals. The person was so happy when they showed up because it's interaction. And then they leave and then they come back, whatever, a few weeks later, and they go to put the stuff away in the freezer and it's full. That's when this started to become more of an issue for dietitians, is understanding the social aspect of eating.
That is fascinating to me, and really something I'm going to want to cover on the Heart of It All going forward is the loneliness epidemic, is the isolation that so many seniors feel, because I think it gets them into problems. It makes them more vulnerable to scams, which we heard about in our second episode with Jeff Horncastle. And I think also it makes them more vulnerable to your point of not being able to nourish their bodies in proper way. Because I mean, to just say it simply, they can't be bothered when they're on their own.
They can't be bothered. Yeah. So what they started to do with the Meals on Wheels program is encourage their staff that if they had time, sit with them while they eat. But when people are struggling to eat, they eat more slowly. And the problem with that is they get partway through the meal and it starts to get cold and then they just don't want it and they don't finish, right? So anyways, a couple of things you can do about that. I know that we say, focus on your meal so that you enjoy it. Don't be on a screen while you're having your meal. This is a situation where I think it could be helpful. If a person has like the TV tray, right? The old fashioned TV tray, and watches a show that they really like, that makes them laugh, say, and has their meal while they're doing that, that can be helpful. If there's a senior center or a community center or a church, sometimes it can be that. Could also be, it could be a weekly date with someone in their family or a friend.
And if people are listening to this podcast or watching this podcast right now and they're wondering what they can do with their loved one or family member if they don't live in the city, majority of us have access to a device where we can do FaceTime, where we can do a Google Meet, a Zoom call.
You can be on Zoom having your dinner together. You can make a once a week date to do that. Yeah. I always say the pandemic with all of its challenges, I wouldn't have wanted to go through it without social media because that allowed us to still connect with one another. And there have been some good learnings from that. And I think that being able to still have that interpersonal, and you can do that while having your meal. And then you see the food going in, whether they're eating.
And a great way to catch up with your loved one as well, which of course we talked about on episode 1 of The Heart of It All, talking about getting those conversations going.
And that happens over food, right? That happens over food.
Thank you so much. We covered so much. I mean, I have so many takeaways. I'm definitely going to package up those foods that I make for my mom as individual portions. That's really front of mind. And I know that people are going to love to know those numbers about sodium, about protein when they're buying those more convenient frozen food. Thank you so, so much.
You're welcome. I'm glad that you're interested in the topic.
Thanks, Devon. You have a great day.
You too. Take care.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Heart of It All, a podcast about navigating the realities of caregiving. The podcast was created, executive produced, and is hosted by me, Teri Hart. Co-executive produced by Carrie, Hayden, and Jess Carroll of 6 of 1 Digital. Music provided by Riverside. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube at The Heart of It All Pod, and let us know your tips and tricks for keeping the senior in your life eating well. And if you have any more questions about nutrition for seniors. You can find Devon's contact information in our show notes. If you like the podcast, please subscribe and share this episode with someone who you think could benefit from these conversations. Also, consider giving us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And please, always take care. Here's this week's movie companion to the Hart of It All podcast. It's Jean Favreau's Chef, a movie all about families, eating well, and making good choices in life.